Three words: Texas not back. Texas remains not back as the West Virginia Mountaineers pick up another victory over Texas. This one, the final home game for West Virginia this season, ends up as a victory. So Mountaineer fans, and almost 50K of them, despite the way the year has been going at Milan Puskar Stadium, their Mountaineer Field, are able to sing Country Roads and able to celebrate the seniors with a victory. WVU winning at 31-23, I believe, as the WVU gets the win, as they now have 5 wins on the year and 1 away from bowl eligibility. This is your WVU postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and WV Sports Now. I'm your host, Mike Asti. Head over to WV Sports Now for Julio's game recap, and then we'll also have our reaction here on the site and the channel throughout the day. I'll be joined by our Karl Ludwig, who is a familiar face and voice to the network here and the channel, to recap this game and talk about how different this game was to some games recently and what this may mean to next week's game, the rest of this season, this year, the bowl game, if it occurs, and barring Kansas, it will, and then moving forward. So, Karl, the Mountaineers get a victory. Jarret Doege looked really good throughout most of the game. It's a banged-up Mountaineer defense, but they did enough despite some big runs for Texas. They never really were able to fully get going. For me, it felt like one of those games that even when Texas pulled it really close, even when they maybe were flirting with causing disaster to West Virginia, even the end of the game that kind of got controversial and questionable with Neal Brown's decision there to throw it in the end zone, when if you just basically run it out, you're going to have the victory at the very least, give Texas a whole field to have to deal with. They helped them out there a little bit. But it still felt like West Virginia was going to win this game all the way through. Despite everything, even when it got close, it felt like a WVU victory. They felt like the better team, and Texas really felt like they weren't in it until maybe midway through the third quarter, when someone told them, hey, you might want to try winning games, even though you're not really having the best of years. What's your reaction from this game? Because this is part of the roller coaster ride. I mean, it literally has been that this year, that this team, which looked so bad the last couple weeks, looked really good 3 weeks ago against Iowa State, and then once again today looks really good. I'm not sure who this team really is still.
Yeah, I mean, a nice win. I mean, any win against Texas is always a very nice win, but
yeah,
Texas looked bad today.
Yeah.
Texas is not a very good football team. I mean, when they put in Hudson Card for a bit in the second half there, and he looked a lot better than Thompson did, but that was just a very, very bad Texas team.
They're not just not back; they just suck.
They were tough to watch at points today. It was just straight 3 outs begin the game. Credit the Mountaineer defense for that, but Texas is just a pretty poor team. But a win's a win, and it's one step closer to being a bowl eligible team now. So baby steps. I mean, are we climbing yet? I don't know, but it's a win. You can't be.
Yeah, and you hear it on the broadcast that, if West Virginia beats Kansas next week, they're getting a bowl game, and then they'll be able to still sell Trust the Climb. I'm not so sure if that even can allow you to still sell Trust the Climb. That's a 500 year. It's bowl eligibility, but last year they secured the bowl well before the season ended. It was a legit bowl, and they got a bowl win. So we'll see, but it does earn extra practices to keep figuring this thing out. Being in a bowl game is certainly better than not for the program and for Neal Brown, and a win over Kansas would get them there. They're going to get invited if they get 6, so they'll get 6 with the win over Kansas. If they do, Kansas put a scare to Oklahoma. Kansas did beat Texas, who flirted with disaster against West Virginia. Nothing's a guarantee. I'll go back to what we talked about here on last week's post-game show. For West Virginia, every game is winnable, like this one over Texas. Every game kind of losable too, the way this season has gone. What was different about this game from either execution, X's and O's standpoint, Jarret Doege in particular? Yeah, we're kind of confused still on this team and who they really are. But this was a much better effort and a team that showed up from the start of this game than teams that, for lack of a better description, kind of slept through first halves, then had to claw back and just didn't have enough. They legitimately played better in this game. We realize Texas is not only not back, but they just aren't that good. But there's still talent there. There's recruits there. West Virginia's looked bad against worse teams than Texas. So what did West Virginia actually do, in particular Doege, to look better and then get the win?
Today, I think he had a lot of time in the pocket. He could sit back there, go through his progressions, find the guys, and he found his receivers at a pretty consistent basis today. I mean, 290 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, no fumbles. So I mean, it was a pretty perfect game. He missed a couple throws throughout the game, but that's all quarterbacks at that point. The offensive line gave him time to play his game and his strength is sitting back there and making nice enough throws across the intermediate field to move the team downfield, and he did. And then in the second half, they allowed Leddie Brown to take over more, and that also helped. But it was just a very, very complete team effort on offense today, and that has to continue to happen against Kansas, and then potentially in a bowl game against whoever it might be if they can get there.
Right. Yeah. We really don't want to put the cart before the horse here and guarantee anything. I mean, Kansas, again, they're potentially the worst Power 5 program in football, but they've been showing they want to compete this year a little bit. They're going to have a lot to play for in that game, wanting to ruin a year. Yeah. They would single-handedly be able to be responsible for saying that you can't trust the climb and send WVU not in a bowl game.
That would be something. Yeah.
I mean, that would be something. And to go into an offseason without any more practices, it would just be a popping of a balloon. You would be chilling for months, and it would be really, really, really bad. But if you can do this to Texas, if you can do this to some other teams this year, if you can play like this, you should be able to beat Kansas. They're going to be favored, even not at home. So West Virginia, again, does have that opportunity to get in a bowl game with a win over Kansas, but they do need to beat Kansas. West Virginia, 5th win of the season, a 31-23 victory over Texas, their last home game of the year. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here on a WVU Postgame show here on PSL and WV Sports Now. Now, you mentioned Leddie Brown was able to get involved. The offensive line certainly played better. The offensive line is definitely one of the reasons why West Virginia's rushing game, just one of the worst in the conference all year. The run game had been the worst, despite the passing game, actually, which was a eye-popping stat to hear. And then I did research, and yeah, it's true that Jarret Doege leads the conference in passes and completions over 20 yards. Insane for an up and down quarterback that's had some really bad games this year, but leading passer in the conference. It really shows you this Big 12 is just not the Big 12 that we're used to. It's a defensive conference. If Jarret Doege is the best QB in the conference or one of the best, that's something. And that includes Caleb Williams not playing the first few weeks, of course. Maybe it would have been him if he had started all season long. Who knows? But that's true. So West Virginia's passing game in terms of the conference has been okay, even though they've had games with 3 points and they haven't really moved the ball. Last year, it was such a run-first team. Leddie Brown, a superstar, 900-plus yards in a truncated COVID season. Not the case this year. You can go offensive line. And that, when the running game's working, it helps Doege, it helps the O-line. The O-line helps everything. They were able to move the ball. So with all that said, any sense you can make of the decision-making at the end of the game to try to throw it back in the end zone to win by, I guess, 2 scores instead of 1, not allow Leddie Brown to have the football, make the yardage even easier for Texas on a comeback? There were still 30 seconds there. It wasn't like there were 3. I mean, again, they won the game. Texas isn't that good, but that felt like that could have been a recipe for a dumpster fire if that is what cost you a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, there wasn't much kind of trust in the Texas offense to do anything on the air or to the ground. But I mean, they gave them a chance at their own on the 40-yard line. I mean, that's
right.
There's still it was about 40 seconds left.
2 completions and you're there. I mean, almost.
I mean, going for it's one thing, but
right.
A prayer to the end zone with 40 seconds left, you stop the clock. That was just a very weird play call. I mean, going for it with a nice little slant or an out route 7 yards on the field is one thing, giving the guy a chance to make a play, but there was no chance in that play, and it was just a weird decision. And Brown is known for some weird decisions, especially going for the 2 trick plays back to back in the first half.
Right.
But it's just that one made no sense in any kind of capacity whatsoever. So
no, it didn't, it did not. No, it did not make sense. And here, Michael Lowe Jr. on the broadcast, it almost seemed like he had been familiar with West Virginia and Neal Brown most of the year. He's called some other games where he was saying, "Hey, you might as well just use the timeouts. You can't go in the locker room. There's no sense in keeping them. Neal Brown has been notorious for not using timeouts throughout this whole season. And then you go into that decision making. There's still a head scratcher in every one of these victories. Even there's a Neal Brown head scratcher every week.
Never easy.
Every week, even in a win, is like, what are you doing? But nonetheless, the Mountaineers do get the victory again, 31-23 over Texas. The powerhouse, the only powerhouse team that they have really owned in the Big 12. You saw that highlight reel from Geno Smith to Will Grier with horns down to even this year with the weird year West Virginia has had. WVU has had no problem beating Texas no matter where the game is played. It could be West Virginia, Texas, or on the moon. So even if this game was in Austin, I feel like we would have had the same result. This Texas team, again, they're just not caring. Even they could be in a bowl game, and I don't think they would care about it. They're almost a team that screams like they would turn it down. They don't want to be there at all. But West Virginia does, and it does appear they're playing for something. It does appear that they're doing this for Neal Brown, that they're still playing for him. This is a Mountaineer team, again, that would get into bowl eligibility with a win next week. We've talked about this all season long, and it's going to continue to be a conversation as the year goes on for sure. But how important would it be for you, for this program, to beat Kansas and really not like crawl through the game with a game-winning field goal, because that would get you a bowl game, but man, that would feel crappy. But to legitimately play well against Kansas, show what you're worth, then turn around, have the practice go well, go into the bowl game. Whoever you're playing, it's going to be a similar team to you. It's not like you're going to all of a sudden go play a 10-win team. You're going to have a middle-of-the-road major conference team likely as well that's had up their ups and downs this year. So beat that team, play well in that game. We probably talked about this last year of what it could do for the program in terms of the climb. But with it being such a roller coaster ride this year, how important really is it for West Virginia to finish strong and show that this can actually be Mountaineer football and not what we saw against Kansas State, or not what we saw against Baylor, or not what we saw? I could just go on and on and on.
Yeah. It's. I mean, last year was they won the bowl game 6-5. They won the game 7-5 season. This year could be a 7-6 season. So it's not really climbing, but
right.
You have to get there. You have to win that game. You have to have that exposure in playing in a big bowl, like not a big bowl game, but just any bowl game. I mean, you have to have that sort of like that chip, that little that token that at least something went right in the season, despite the ups and downs. You at least got something out of the season. So beating Kansas is obviously, you can't lose. If you lose to Kansas, the season was a complete and utter disaster. I mean, that's going 5-6 or 5-7 losing to Kansas would be the worst case scenario. I mean, even if it's inexcusable. So you have.
I mean, would that be a scenario where if you're Shane Lyons, are you saying, "Look, I could trust you for another year, but holy man, we got to talk here." I mean, I don't want to do the holiday season, but he's not going to be fired. But God, losing to Kansas would just
that would be any momentum he had ever would be just out the window at that point if they lose to Kansas on Saturday. The fans will not be pleased whatsoever, and they already aren't pleased, even with the win against Texas today, probably. So they have to beat Kansas. They have to at least. I mean, the goal is to win a bowl game here and to finish the season at least above 500. Anything besides that is not climbing. And even with that, you're still not really climbing, because the same thing happened last year. It's kind of just stagnant at that point. But that's better than going downhill, though.
Yeah, no, again, it is absolutely better to be a neutral than having your car sliding down a hill and going off the cliff into the water.
Being in Texas right now.
Right. And they that's kind of Texas right now. Yeah, as they eventually transition to the SEC, as you heard those chants at the end of this game. West Virginia gets the victory 31-23. Leddie Brown, 158 yards on the ground and a touchdown, an average of 4.8 per. I would say now this being his best game of the year.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Jarret Doege, 27 for 43, 290, 3 touchdowns. Was sacked 3 times, despite we're talking about the offensive line having their better days. So 3 still kind of more than you'd want. And a quarterback rating of 142.5. We talked Doege a little bit earlier and how he showed signs of playing better. I got to ask you this because we heard this on the broadcast. I mean, neither one of us were at the stadium. We both were watching this on TV. And I'm not going to present this as breaking news, even though it was basically presented as that by ESPN, that Jarret Doege saying he has unfinished business. He did not walk as part of senior day. I don't think it's shocking to either of us or anyone who follows the program that he would want to come back or would even be coming back, because really, first off, there's no other option. I mean, you could actually make an argument that him coming back is actually good for the program. He has got better down the stretch. Garrett Green just can't get in games. He's not showing you enough in practice, apparently, for Brown. As a passer, you need to do that to play. And any recruit they have coming in, they don't want to play next year. It's for 2 years. So Doege might need to be a necessary bridge. And yes, he has been the leading passer in the conference. He has thrown the deep ball well. He is developing a chemistry with Ford Wheaton. You've seen games like this from him that he can play well. So he's saying he wants to come back. But ESPN basically said, like, it's definitely happening. He's coming back. He's there. He's going to be the starter. Him and Brown have talked about it. I'm not sure where they're getting that from. Local media hasn't really been that definitive. But number one, do you feel like that is 100% true, that the cart can now be put before the horse, that he is definitely coming back? And number two, do you feel like he has the starting job locked up for next year? That's the other end of this. He could easily want to come back and be coming back. I think that's clear if you don't walk on senior day, but he hasn't been great this year. Neal Brown does love him from their personal relationship since he was 12 years old, but I think that is a little bit overhyped because he's not going to just give it to somebody who won't show him anything. Does he have to still play for that job? Is it locked up? Is it his? Will he go into next season as the starter no matter what? Or can that be shaken up, since it does appear now that he is coming back?
Yeah, well, I think he's coming back personally. I mean, I know that they mentioned the broadcast today and that he didn't walk in senior day, but I think he's going to come back. I mean, there's not much of an option for him to not come back. I mean, he's not going to the NFL.
Right.
If he wants to keep playing, he's got to play again next year, and I think he will. Right. And I think he, even with Nico Marcio coming in,
right,
I think Doege's still the guy. Neal Brown has made it very apparent that Jarret Doege is his guy. And with nothing shown from Will Crowder, with Garrett Green being almost exclusively used as a Wildcat running quarterback, I think. Yeah,
one pass attempt in this game. It did go for 11 yards, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that's his longest pass completion of the year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it was a nice throw, but it was also like off an end around kind of trick play, which was nice.
They all are.
You should be used more of that situation, but that's yeah. I think Doege will come in next year as the starter.
Okay.
I think he probably will start. It'll be nice to see if Marcio can come in as a true freshman and compete. I mean, he's having a great year in Arizona. The fans would love to have that kind of jolt, but a true freshman coming in starting day one, it just does not seem likely.
No.
I can't see Neal Brown doing that. So
not with veteran receivers. I don't even think the team would kind of want it. That would just be uneasy, because if they're talking about needing to develop chemistry and you bring in a true freshman, how can you develop it? You're talking about a month to get going.
Right. And so if Doege's starting, if that's a good or bad thing, that's a whole different story, but I think he will start. As he'll be a 6th-year senior at that point.
Yeah.
He'll be 4th year in the program, so he'll have to show some. I mean, this year can't happen again next year. I mean,
what's the leash for him? Because this year, I think we can also agree that he had to start entering this season. People that wanted Green to start this year, that's just ridiculous. Off of the end of last year, you do win a bowl game. He did get better. Green then had no experience entering this season. But right away, Doege looked bad against Maryland. He's had his peaks, his valleys. He's looking okay in this game, obviously, against Texas in the win. We've seen him look solid against Iowa State, but we've seen really bad games from him as well. It appears really the same guy. Talking about neutral of the program, he appears to be a neutral from this year to last year. It's up and down. It's hard to say he got better. It's hard to really say he got worse because of the numbers as well. So with that said, what can fans expect from Doege next year? Is there any hope he can get better, like they also talked about on the broadcast with the chemistry and with receivers saying, oh, Doege's going to be better next year? Is that really a thing, or is that just kind of lip service? And is there anything that can occur that would squander that opportunity for him next year? Meaning, if he started off the year like he did this year, say week 3 or 4, West Virginia has lost 1 or 2 games and Doege has not played well, do you think Neal Brown would then say, I let you hang in there in 2021. I can't do it any longer. And would he be more vulnerable of getting yanked and legitimately pulled mid-season if we're still seeing bad Doege?
Yeah, I think next year as his last year, definitively, if he comes out and he has the same start he had this year, he's got to go. It's time for the future to come in and take that reign. Because, I mean, the whole point of this season has been what is the point? Like, what is being built right now? Is Doege, like, we didn't think Doege was the future, but with the COVID rules and him being back for another year, it's just there really is no like blueprint for the future right now. Because if Doege comes back, then how much better can he get? Because we know who Jarret Doege is at this point. He's a solid quarterback with the right situations, but he's not going to have like a Joe Burrow or Kenny Pickett type jump here. He is who he is. I mean, this is his redshirt senior season. He's his fifth year of college football.
Right.
I think we know who he is at this point. So
I think we do, but I guess the only devil's advocate stance is it would be increased chemistry with Ford Wheaton and those receivers. That is what was brought up, and that's what they're talking about, that it would be then a full off season of no COVID, hopefully for them, full practices, facilities are open. He's the guy, they're the guy, they're better than they were, of course, and they're more confident than they were. Could they even help him get better by them being better?
Well, yeah, I mean, they've been. This is a very good unit, and they've had some drops this year. But I'm not sure what another offseason and what another full season will do for his development, because his flaws aren't something that's just going to change overnight.
Yeah,
he's got a decent arm, not a very strong arm. He breaks down with pressure in his face. I mean, I guess the line being better would be a step forward if they can get a year older and gel together more, give him more time in the pocket.
Sure.
But if the game ever gets rough, then who's to say it won't be the same old Doege again, and he'll have a bad moment in a big game. I'm not sure what the ceiling is. The floor is pretty apparent of what he can be. The ceiling, I'm not sure how much higher we can go with him at the quarterback.
Yeah, Karl Ludwig here at WV Sports Now, our post-game show. West Virginia does get the home victory, the final home victory in the final home game. The Mountaineers get another victory for the program over Texas. It's almost old hat now. Death taxes and beating Texas for West Virginia in the Big 12. The Mountaineers win this one 31-23. Subscribe here to Pittsburgh Sports Live for more of these post-game shows, more shows like this, and then head over to WV Sports Now for all our coverage of the Mountaineers over there. Yeah, it does appear Doege is really a neutral. It really does, and it appears that neutral is kind of his ceiling. However, who knows? It could even be that almost accidentally he might get better, at least numbers-wise, because maybe Ford Wheaton and them wouldn't have as many drops, or they would turn a pass for 10 into 20, 30 that wasn't there this year. So maybe you would get fool's gold improvement from Doege. I think one thing to go at what was said on the broadcast, because they're not going to bash a guy, obviously, on the mothership, but the whole thing of like he can talk to Doege because they live so close and turn something around, like you mentioned. Joe Burrow is an incredible talent that is having success in the NFL. Yeah. So that's why he was able to come out of nowhere. He's a future of an NFL franchise. Kenny Pickett seemingly came out of nowhere this year to be a Heisman candidate and be on a team that is going to likely be in a legit bowl game. But we saw flashes of this last year. I even could argue there were flashes of this 2 years ago where many could have argued, and I did at the time, that Pitt team was letting him down and that he was kind of making something out of nothing, even with a bad offensive line. You saw what Pickett could be. I'm not saying that you would predict Pickett to have been this, but you saw that there was a willing opportunity for improvement, and he could get better and maybe had a higher ceiling. None of that is really seen with Doege. So even if him and Pickett get together and Pickett shares some of the holy water with him, I don't think there's going to be much more from Doege. I don't think the Pickett possibility is there.
He is who he is at this point. Doege is that's not a bad thing per se, but that's just who he is.
Oh, he could be worse. And this is, again, why I think we're both saying that Doege's likely your starter next year. Doege had to be your starter this year. If Doege did not start this year, as much as I will admit, I likely was wrong. I was calling for Doege to be pulled weeks ago to see what you have. Didn't think Doege would be back. I'm wrong. Doege clearly is coming back. And then also, it's very true that if you likely pulled Doege 3 or 4 weeks ago, you're probably not going into Kansas with a chance at a bowl game. You probably would have lost more games at this point. That is bad for the program. You want to get in a bowl game. And next year, whether it be green or a true freshman, I can't see either one of those scenarios as a starting quarterback being better than Doege, because Daege's ceiling is likely higher than theirs, even if bad Doege might be worse, or maybe in a given moment, Green could be better in certain plays. Doege has to be the guy. So the hashtag done with Doege. Rest in peace. It's going to be at least a year before that. Yeah, at least before that one can be returned to its glory on Twitter and elsewhere here. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti. Karl, what are your thoughts on the defense before we wrap this up? Obviously, we have one more of these for football next week, and then maybe two more of these if they do have a bowl game in terms of our football post-game shows, and we'll wrap the season as well. But this Mountaineer defense, I think fairly, is getting some credit for being a solid unit most of this year. I mean, they're still allowing points. Dante Stills has shown at times that he can be an elite player. He's not his brother, but he's shown that at times. The big play over Iowa State. But this defense has also been so banged up. That probably is part of the problem that they couldn't carry this team. They were great last year for a while, despite all the scandal. What are your thoughts defensively for this team in terms of this game, in terms of this season, in terms of moving forward? So much of the conversation is about Doege, the quarterback position, replacing Leddie Brown, etc. These receivers stepping up, and even Neal Brown. But this defense is going to need a whole overhaul. This defense has been really hurt this year. And if none of that happens and get better, I don't even know if Doege getting better would matter, because you do have to have a defense. Yeah. Going back to Pitt and Kenny Pickett, the reason why Pitt was never a viable playoff team is because their defense sucked for 2 or 3 weeks, and they lost, and they got embarrassed against Western Michigan and then Miami. Those games aren't on Pickett. Those games are on the defense. I mean, the best case scenario would be this defense getting healthy at the very minimal. But what's the future of this defense, and how has this defense played for you? And maybe was this another unsung effort from the defense in this game?
Well, yeah, I'd say it was a very solid effort. I wouldn't say it was like a show-stopping. I mean, they got gashed in the ground into the
end. They did. Yes.
They played very well against Thompson. I'm not sure if that's more on him on the defense, but Card came in, played well. They ran the ball very, very well. At one point, the Texas halfback were going 10 yards of carry there. So.
Oh, yeah. Robinson, 111 yards, 12.3. Johnson, 5.1. Card, 9 when he did come in. That was actually going to be my follow-up in terms of, the defense is playing better and kind of unsung, but what happened against the ground? Because usually they are better against the ground. Yeah,
I was surprised the same as you, but I guess it was a pretty solid effort through the air besides the one long touchdown pass. The ground game was kind of a weird day for him. They were the backs were just kind of cutting through holes. They saw the field well. They were breaking tackles. Usually, it's a pretty good run defense. The front seven is usually very, very good. It was still a good effort from them today defensively over as a whole, but they are known to give up more yards than they should with some shoddy tackling, some inconsistent secondary coverage. But like you said, they're also a very banged up bunch, especially in the secondary right now with missing some key guys.
They are banged up. Yeah. I think that's kind of been underrated for most of this season in the roller coaster ride. I don't think this team is really any better than what they've been regardless, but maybe a little bit with the healthier squad. And certainly they have been banged up defensively. The Mountaineers do get this victory, Karl. We do have more shows, more football post-game shows. Probably going to have you on more as well, and we'll wrap the season regardless. But I do just want to get your thoughts here. Final home game of the season. They win at 31-23. So we talked offense, we talked defense, we talked Brown and Doege. If I got to ask you 1 to 10 in terms of where you are trusting this climb right now, this team does win their final home game. They're now 1 away from a bowl game. It'd be the same win total going into the bowl game this year, and could finish with the same win total as last year. Again, it's nothing to really brag about for the heights this program has been. I mean, they celebrated the 10-year anniversary of 2011, 2012 Orange Bowl championship season, last Big East championship season. That was a fantastic team, one of the best offenses ever. We've seen even better days in the Big 12 from this team, but there'll be year 4 next year. That'll be 2 mediocre bowl appearances, at least 1 bowl victory, regardless of what happens this year. Where are you on trusting the climb? And we also talked about what they're losing in terms of recruits. We had a whole show on that. This season's been a roller coaster ride. But where are you 1 to 10 on trusting the climb with Neal Brown as we speak? And we'll certainly be able to revisit this.
I'd say right now, I'd probably give it a 4.
That's still low. Wow. Okay.
Maybe 4.5. I give it 4.5. If they can finish the year off with a bowl win, then we'll talk again. But as of right now, they have to win 2 more games to get there, and that's not guaranteed even against Kansas, who dropped 59 points on Texas. So 4 right now. They can get a bowl win 2 in a row, look good, then we can talk again.
Yeah, I didn't think Kansas had 50+ in them. I don't even know no matter who they're playing.
They went off against them. So we'll see what the defense can do next week against a high-powered Kansas offense.
Yeah, I mean, West Virginia's going to need to be on their A game, and they certainly can't crawl through early parts of that game, and they're going to have something to play for, so they can't get distracted. This is crazy, but they got to focus in on Kansas.
This year.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, imagine if a few different balls rolled a different way. They would have had a win over Oklahoma. I mean, Kansas could have 3 or 4 victories this year, which wouldn't be as horrendous as it currently stands. But they did beat Texas, who West Virginia also beat. But every game is winnable. Every game is losable for the Mountaineers. And you just don't know what Mountaineer team you're going to see prior to the game. You really don't. Because this team didn't look like last week's team. Not sure how they're the same guys, but they really, really are. West Virginia won this one, though, 31-23. They now are 1 win away from bowl eligibility and maybe climbing up that chart there for Karl's 4.5 generous ranking of his trust of the climb. Not even at 5. That's low. I was going to guess maybe you'd be at 5.5, maybe at least 4.5. That's low.
What's yours at right now?
I think mine might be
as of right this second.
As we stand right now, mine's probably 5.5. Mine's maybe 5 or 5.5. I'm not 7 or 8 or anything wild, but I think I agree with what Stedman Bailey said when he was interviewed. The Neal Brown, prior to what we've seen recently, was doing well recruiting, so he does need to improve on that again because he did lose some 4-star kids.
Okay. He's not doing badly. He's
still doing okay. Right. And it is not nothing to have him come in, and I don't even know if this would have been going on in terms of the celebrating the 2012 Orange Bowl team if Neal Brown's predecessor was still there. I mean, I know firsthand from former players that said they were not welcome at the program. That's insane. I mean, Mike Logan told me on a show actually here for this channel that he was not welcome. He literally basically was told, can't come around. The man lives in Pittsburgh. He's not far. Was an NFL great, won a Super Bowl, was a great player in college, couldn't get down there to Morgantown. Hadn't seen a game in person in a decade. I don't know why. He didn't even actually know either. So it wasn't even like he was given a reason. So those things are just asinine. And Neal Brown done the right things by bringing these players back. And this helps recruiting. We talked about having a true freshman there, seeing this game. I would think that Stedman Bailey walked over and talked to him and they had a conversation. I don't know that to be true, but those things can't happen if you're not invited. I mean, It does show that there's some history, there's a pedigree, there's people that are going to look out for you. There's NFL players that are going to be able to help you get there if that's what you want to do. It's all hands on deck when you got a major program that's been around 100 years, and this is the 15th winningest program in college football history. So that's all good. But you look at the wins-loss record versus FBS competition. You look at this up and down ride, some of the questionable calls. I can't be more than a 5 or so, but he's done a lot of the right things. I do think if you end this season, I'm also kind of thinking they're going to at least get in the bowl game, maybe win a bowl game. If that all occurs, then you stay at a solid 5, maybe 6 at the most, give it 1 more year. But again, if we're having this exact same conversation where they are fighting for a bowl game at the end of the next season and nothing has improved, and he did stick with Doege all year when he wasn't good because they're friends, then no. Then I'm going to go to like a 1.5 at that point. I mean,
the same, but great. He's a great guy. Great.
Right.
He's building the right way here, but he has to have that on-field success and actual results to back it up.
Yeah.
It still hasn't quite happened yet.
Yeah, no, to say the least, it has not. And some of the big wins don't even look as big as they were. I mean, let's be fair. This is a great win. This isn't a big win. Texas sucks. This is not a big win. He can't brag about this.
Yeah, it's a very fun win, but
it's a fun win. It's not a big win.
4-7 now.
Yeah, Texas is not good. Iowa State, okay, that's a big win.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech, You have a trophy, but no. I mean, they lost 4 in a row literally after they left Morgantown. It's nothing to brag about, even though that's a rival. Last year, Kansas State, maybe. But you're talking about like 1.5 in terms of big wins in his 3 years at the school. And yeah, year 1, there was nothing there. But there got to be more. You got to expect more. It can deliver more. And at the very least, if they don't get in the ACC when things shift around and they get stuck in the Big 12, there got to be an expectation to be one of the top 2 teams in a conference without Oklahoma and Texas. At that point, in terms of recruiting, if you're 3 or 4th in a conference with basically former mid-majors and you and Oklahoma State, Oklahoma State is a potential, team fighting for the playoff this year, and Cincinnati as well would join. But who knows how Cincinnati would do in a major conference. You got to be higher up. You got to be better. You got to expect more. They should be able to do more. So I think at the very least, and part of my 5.5 above your 4.5 as we wrap things up here, is I'm also assuming that Shane Lyons at some point this offseason will have a meeting in which there is nobody else there. The door will be closed, and he will say, I trust you, but if this continues, I am not scared to fire you, despite us being friends. There has to be something like that going on.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah.
There has to be something like that. There has to be a fear of God put into Neal Brown and a hot seat that the university puts on him, even if they're not going to publicly say it is there. That all has to occur. But again, I think you put it perfectly, because people are celebrating a little bit, maybe too much for me. It's a fun win. It is a good win. You needed the win.
Yeah.
It's not a good win in general. It's not a great win by any means. This is not a resume win for anyone, including the program. It's a fun, necessary win for West Virginia, getting the win over Texas, the final home win of the year. They're now 1 away from a bowl game, but it is a necessary, fun win. That's what it is. It's not even a good win. So West Virginia gets the fun, necessary win over Texas, 31-23. They win at home, and if they win on the road in Kansas, they will be in a bowl game, and make of it what you will.